What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, April 7th, 2021, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Powhana Friday and whatever insanity is in the offing. And there does seem to be a bumper crop of craziness happening right now. And so we've got a lot to talk about. As usual, we're going to do news for about an hour. Then we're going to open up the phone lines. Let you call on in with your comments, questions, and observations. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. So let's get right on into it. Joe Biden is still on the warpath, as it were, against Georgia's new voting law. He's describing it as a Jim Crow law and says it's up to the masters whether it follows companies he praised for speaking up to move the Major League Baseball tournament out of the state. And he's praising all these companies that are putting these pressure on Georgia. And what they're doing is they're sending a warning to other states not to pass such laws or they'll suffer economic damage. So it's kind of an extortion deal is what's going on. Here's an interesting little story that came on out of WayneDupree.com pointing out that white liberals may talk a good talk about being opposed to racism, but they themselves very often prove they're more racist than just about anybody else. And so now the latest justification why voter ID laws must be suppressed is, and I am not kidding you this, because blacks can't find the Department of Motor Vehicles. So apparently white liberals have a savior complex. They believe they're so much better, smarter, and more powerful than anyone else that they need to rescue all the rest of us who couldn't possibly take care of ourselves no matter what. Now, story coming on out of Breitbart. We talked about this before, but it's been repeated. There's a new survey out by Rasmussen Reports that found 73% of black voters are in favor of voter ID and say it is necessary to achieve a fair and secure election process. So the very people that the anti-voter ID, vote rigger, vote stealer, whatever you want to call them, claim to be supporting, don't go along with this stuff. Now, the survey was taken between April 1st and 4th among 1,000 likely U.S. voters, and the question was simply, are laws requiring voters to show photo identification, such as a driver's license, before being allowed to vote necessary to a fair and secure election process? And the vast majority of voters across the board said yes, it's necessary. 89% of Republicans and 65% of Democrats said voter ID is necessary. So that whole idea that voter ID is racist and we've got to get rid of it. I mean, you need an ID for just about anything else. Jen Psaki was having a press conference and a Fox News reporter came on out and made the comment that Major League Baseball has moved their all-star game from Atlanta to Denver, and yet Colorado has similar voting laws to Georgia. And Jen Psaki basically lost her cool at that particular point and didn't really have much of another response to that. Now, a former commissioner of Major League Baseball is slamming the current commissioner, Rob Manfred, saying he made a serious mistake pulling out of Georgia. This thing is starting to really come apart and backflash on the vote riggers here. One of the companies that has put pressure on Georgia is, of course, Delta Airlines. And last week, Trump asked for a full and unrelenting boycott of several corporations who are operating as political activists to advance the far-left agenda of being able to vote without documenting who you are. And one of those corporations was Delta Airlines. airlines. And last Sunday, Delta had to cancel over 100 flights. And websites at 3 Delta hubs showed 33 canceled flights arriving or departing. Delta says it's because of a staff shortage, but very clearly the boycott is definitely working. And I can imagine there are a lot of travelers who are hostile to airlines in general, not because of what's going on down in Georgia, but just because of all that mask nonsense to get on the plane and the rest of it. So Delta's taking a major hit on that, and that's a good thing. Okay, if they want to declare economic war against honest elections, then we, the honest American people, need to fight back economically as well. Out in California, and of course, where else could this possibly happen? Caitlyn Jenner is looking at running for governor. She's already, he, she, it, whatever, is already talking with political consultants, according to Axios, about running for the governorship there. Now, Kamala Harris and her husband have finally moved into the vice president's official residence at the Naval Observatory just days after complaining about living out of suitcases while it was being renovated. And I always thought it might be fun to be the vice president because you got a neat telescope right there on the grounds that on your nights off you can go and peek at the sky with here. And there we are. Let's see. Now, this story, I think, is basically going to be the straw that broke the back of John Durham's credibility, because attorneys are mandated to destroy all the evidence in the Seth Rich case by the 28th of this month. And John Durham's office has still so far refused to mandate the evidence be preserved. Now, this is all stuff you, the American people, have not seen. Now, for those who are a little late to the game, Seth Rich was a Democratic staffer for Hillary Clinton's election campaign back in 2016, and is thought to have been the source of a lot of very damaging information that was released to WikiLeaks, and Hillary has blamed for the election loss. And then Seth Rich was killed near his home. The official story is it was a botched robbery, which I guess botched is a good word, because they didn't take his wallet, they didn't take his very expensive wristwatch, they didn't take his cell phone, which has a certain resale value, and he was just left on the ground there. And at the same time he died, the flow of information to WikiLeaks stopped. And the American people have been waiting to find out what the heck was going on, what the relationship was with WikiLeaks. But now apparently all that evidence is going to be destroyed on the 28th, and John Durham is not moving to preserve any of that information for you, the American people. Getting on over to the George Floyd situation, Derek Chauvin's trial had a little bit of a surprise because George Floyd's friend, who allegedly gave him a counterfeit $20 bill and drugs that got him arrested, has invoked the Fifth Amendment lest he incriminate himself in drugs and third-degree murder charges. And so that came on down. Over in Minneapolis, the police medical trainer, it tells Derek Chauvin's trial that the noisy crowd could have made it hard for him to hear George Floyd struggling to breathe. Now, the other bombshell that came on through is they had a new videotape of Derek Chauvin holding George Floyd on the ground, clearly showing him kneeling on the shoulder and not the neck. So this thing is, it's all over the place. And again, we've got all these dire warnings from the Black Lives Matter Antifa crowd that they're going to burn America down if Derek Chauvin isn't crucified live on national TV or something to that effect here. Getting into the COVID-19 situation here, Joe Biden has announced that all American adults will be eligible for the vaccine by April 19th. Oh joy, oh bliss. bliss, oh happiness. Story coming on out of Domagood. At least 10 million doses of the Astrazeneca COVID-19 vaccine had to be thrown away last year from the same Baltimore production plant that ruined 15 million Johnson & Johnson doses last week. And apparently they've never heard the phrase quality control. Okay, now nearly half of all the new U.S. coronavirus infections in the past week came from just 5 states, and Biden is facing pressure to prioritize vaccine distribution to New York, Michigan, Florida, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Now, here in Indiana, we are off the state mandate for the masks and social distancing. A lot of places of business are still enforcing it, but more and more we're seeing people go about without masks. And Claire and I, we carry them, but unless we're specifically told to put them on, we're not bothering anymore. We really, really aren't. And it's amazing. We're discovering that people actually do have a lower half to their face. And it's been so long since we've seen it, we weren't sure. Maybe it rotted away or something like that. I don't know. Right. Over in the United Kingdom, their top pharmaceutical regulator says that there is, in fact, a link between the Astrazeneca vaccine and the deadly blood clots, but they're trying to minimize it or trivialize it, saying it's only 1 in a million patients are going to get this. It's actually more than that already based on the reported cases. And I guess 1 in a million doesn't sound like it's a real problem unless you are that one, of course. And then your priorities change here. Researchers have imaged what happens when the Astrazeneca vaccine goes into your body, and it turns cells into little factories that produce the spike proteins just like the virus in order to fight off COVID-19. And apparently the idea is that if the virus encounters a cell that already has these spike proteins, it can't reinfect it. It just tries to go someplace else. This story is kind of interesting, and it came over from Natural News here. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Center for Science in the Public Interest are going after Dr. Joseph Mercola. He has been literally threatened to stop writing about the health benefits of vitamin D to ward off respiratory illnesses like the Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19. And this is because knowledge is the enemy of every totalitarian regime. And somebody wrote in to say, well, if they're trying to suppress information about vitamin D being able to defeat COVID-19, this lines up with all this talk about closing the beaches so that people can't get, a lot of exposure to the sun, which creates vitamin D inside your skin. And again, it's to keep us all dependent on these very costly, not to mention intrusive vaccines and other medical treatment. The goal of the medical industrial complex, or at least the result of it, even if it's not intentional, but the result of the way business is conducted by the medical industrial complex, they make more money the sicker the American people are. If we were all perfectly healthy, we're taking our vitamins, we're getting our sunshine, we're getting plenty of exercise and the rest of it, the entire medical industrial complex would collapse. And even Goldman Sachs said curing patients is a bad business model. The majority of profits are going to come from finding people who are ill and treating their symptoms endlessly until they die or run out of money, whichever comes first. Now, Republicans are starting to stand up in defiance against the vaccine passports, and apparently the Republicans may make this an issue in the 2022 midterm elections. Now, as part of the general strategy to regain the majority in the House of Representatives, Republicans believe that vaccine passports should not be mandated as they violate personal privacy rights and would be a product of government overreach by exerting too much public control over over private lives. Remember, it is illegal under United States law, not to mention the Nuremberg Code, to subject people to experimental medical treatments, which is what these all are, without informed consent. And means of coercing them to get the shot, like, you've got to have a vaccine passport, or you can't go to the movies, you can't go to sporting events, you can't go dancing, you can't go to restaurants. That's coercion to get around that. Now, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has declared it was unacceptable for local governments or businesses to require proof of vaccination for people to participate in normal society. DeSantis has also signed an executive order recently banning any future vaccine certificate requirements in Florida, and now he is asking the Republican-controlled state legislature turn the executive order into a state law. And I wish him a lot of luck on that. Ron Paul is out there expressing the opinion that the imposition and requirement of vaccine passports might be the thing that makes people wake up and say, enough is enough is enough. And I certainly hope so. And, I get a strong sense of people being fed up with all of this nonsense. Yesterday, which was the first day we were without the mask mandate, Claire and I were down at the local food market, and we saw one other lady there not wearing a mask. And I said, well, here's for another courageous individual. And she said, I'm not courageous. I'm just tired of it all. So I think that is a good reflection of what the public are thinking right now. Over in Great Britain, despite repeatedly denying for over a year that they were going to have vaccine passports, it has come on out that the British government has planned to roll out COVID vaccine passports all along. This is coming from a report in The Guardian, and the vaccine passport system was already in an advanced stage back in December at the very same time as UK government ministers were telling the public, no, there's not going to be a vaccine passport. Really, but if there is, we know best. We know better than you, the British subjects. Okay, up in Michigan, 246 infected and 3 dead from COVID-19 despite having the full vaccination. Really successful vaccine there. This story, I think, is going to strike a blow for a lot of people. There was this 25-year-old preschool teacher named Desiree Penrod, and she posted on Facebook after getting the COVID-19 vaccine that she was not reacting very well to it. On March 10th, she wrote, "The vaccine is killing me today. My arm hurts beyond exhausted, headaches, stomach cramps, and earaches." And a lot of people said that she looked pale today, and she really feeling sick. Now, Facebook slapped a label on the young teacher's post with the usual warning, COVID-19 vaccines go through many tests for safety and effectiveness before they're approved. Okay, and sadly, the young woman passed away shortly thereafter. Now, Facebook is basically caught in a lie here because none of these vaccines are approved by the FDA, and they have not gone through the full suite of safety testing. They are being used under what's called an emergency authorization. So Facebook is just flat out lying to you on this. These drugs are not FDA approved. All right, if you are my age, you remember a time when Disneyland was kind of this really wonderful, special place, the Magic Kingdom, and you went there, you had fun, everybody was friendly. It was a very pleasant experience. It was starting to go downhill. The last time Claire and I were in California, and I said, let's go to Disneyland. We drove down there. And they had already instituted, these checks of going through your camera bags and your purse and everything. It was a huge, long line. And, we got there and I said, I'm not going to deal with this anymore. And we just turned around and left here. But apparently now Disneyland is arresting their own guests who refuse to get a COVID temperature check. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with more news. Welcome Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about COVID-19. We're talking about some of the bizarre things that are happening associated with that. Over in Great Britain, there is a company called Will I Am, and they are coming out with a smart mask. And it's a HEPA filtered mask that you wear. It has built-in noise-canceling headphones, a charging port, and LED lights at the front. It's very science fiction, looks like something out of Star Wars. The price is $299. They may have missed the market on this one, I think. Meanwhile, over in France, the elite have been caught ignoring the lockdown. There is a network of secret, lavish restaurants that the elite are going to. And French TV channel M6 aired secretly recorded footage of wealthy politicians and powerful business owners enjoying lavish meals at an underground restaurant located in a beautiful part of Paris. And the video shows guests at the restaurant whining and dining without any masks, including the one that covers just the nose. They're kissing each other. They're ignoring social distancing rules. The cost of the dinners are at least 490 euros per head. Oh man, it does lifestyles of the rich and undeserving here. Story coming on out of your destination now. At least 7 U.S. colleges have announced students must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 to come back to their campuses this fall. And that includes Cornell, Rutgers, Brown University, Northeastern University. And so, again, it's coercive means to get you to take that vaccine, which, according to the earlier story from Michigan, I think it was, it's not even really working. So you have to wonder, what the heck is going on here? They're just forcing us all to take a totally useless vaccine and experimental treatments here. A former Food and Drug Administration official has sounded the warning that the U.S. faces a tsunami of deaths from illnesses like heart disease and diabetes because Americans have been skipping their regular medical appointments during the pandemic. And maybe not. I think given the quality of American medical care these days, it might have actually saved a few lives, but that's another story for another time. Interesting story. I mean, Biden is out there with a checkbook that's filled with your money, and he's just, having a fine old time. This is coming from the Washington Compost. The Biden administration next week is going to launch a funeral assistance program that will provide up to $9,000 each to cover the burial costs of every American who died of COVID-19. This is the largest program of its type ever offered by the federal government, and this covers the cost of interment or cremation if that's what you prefer. Now, the Federal Emergency Management Agency has reimbursed burial costs before, but it's never offered as large a payment to so many people. In 2017, FEMA paid $2.6 million to 976 people for funeral costs of victims of 3 hurricanes. This was an average of $2,600 per applicant, and Biden's new program caps it at $9,000. And by the way, if you're young, you probably haven't looked at it. It does cost a lot of money to die in this country and be buried or cremated, and that's why I have decided that when I go, I'm donating my body to science so they can study it and send me a report. Over in New York, Governor Cuomo has signed a bill repealing the legal immunity granted to the New York nursing homes during the pandemic. And this may be an attempt to save his own face because of the probe into the hundreds of excess deaths at those care facilities. So he's getting ready to basically save himself by throwing those nursing homes under the litigation wagon, as it were. Another story in the medical area, this is from Madness Hub. There is a movement out there now to cap the price of insulin to just $50 a month, so it's accessible to everybody. And there's been a big stink over the last several months on how insulin prices have just gone through the roof, to the point where a lot of people who need it can't get it anymore. And of course, that puts them in a serious, serious world of hurt. Turning to the international news, the CIA is now bragging that they armed the Afghan Mujahideen, the Taliban, during the expulsion of the Soviet Union. The problem is those Mujahideen, the Taliban, are now using those exact same weapons to kill Americans. So a little bit, didn't really think it all the way through, before you sounded that one. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about Ukraine. Things are heating up there. I am very concerned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the international news. We're talking about, right now, Ukraine. And very early this morning, we started seeing videos coming out of the Donbass region that record the sounds of increased gunfire, light artillery, and of course, being nighttime shots, you couldn't really see that much, but you could definitely hear a lot on the soundtrack. There's a story out of PatriotRising.com, and it says that heavy shelling is being reported in Ukraine as Russian television discusses a possible nuclear strike. Now, I have a problem with that second one, as I'm sure you all do. I don't imagine that Putin and the Russians would cross that nuclear line, but I really don't feel quite as confident in the common sense of our own government. We have a real hothead in charge of foreign policy who's backed up by all these warmongers, and we are now closer to war with Russia than we have been probably since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And more forces are heading in toward the conflict zone. There's been a lot of talk lately about NATO and whether Ukraine can join it. And there is a story that came out of Russia today saying that NATO does have an open door policy, but Ukraine is unlikely to walk through it, according to German officials. And Kiev is claiming that only NATO membership will end the risk of a supposed Russian aggression in the Donbass, but there are currently no plans for the country to join the U.S.-led military bloc, according to the German government. And I would like to point out again, first of all, there doesn't seem to be an indication of a Russian aggression. The only aggressions that we have actually seen in Ukraine go back to when the U.S. backed a coup d'etat that brought down the legitimate elected government of Ukraine and installed a junta, which triggered the secession of Crimea and the attempted secession of the Donbass. And that's what puts us in this mess right now. And story coming on out again, Russia Today. Moscow pledges retaliation to the United States and United Kingdom plans for rocket deployment in range of Russia's borders, sparking a new missile crisis fear. And Russia would be forced to defend itself if Western nations go through with plans to station short and long-range missiles in Europe, according to a Moscow diplomat. And their concern, obviously, is the missiles will be used to target the country's air defenses. So in a statement released Monday, Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova said that Washington was increasingly discussing proposals to deploy rocket launchers to the continent. Now, previously banned by the INF Treaty, research and development has reportedly resumed since the pact was torn up in 2019 by then-President Donald Trump. Story coming on out from Pravda. Residents of the village of Androvskoye, say that 3 times fast, are basically coming forward with more details about the shelling of their village by unmanned aerial vehicles run by the armed forces of Ukraine. And they're talking about that small child that was literally blown to bloody bits. And yesterday when I reported on that story, I said he's going to become a martyr for the Ukrainian people. And it does seem like that is what is happening. Story out of Pravda again. Ukraine is admitting that NATO is preparing for war over Crimea to, quote, win back the Crimea. Now, I want to remind everybody what really brought us to this place, and I'm going to do this very, very slowly so that the government agents who monitor this broadcast will understand. When the United States overthrew the government of Ukraine and installed the junta, the people of Crimea held a referendum. Look that up in your dictionary. And they voted to secede from Ukraine, which is their right underneath the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the United States, by virtue of its membership in the United Nations, is obliged to support, to agree with. And then the people of Crimea held a second referendum, and they voted to ask to join the Russian Republic. And the Russian Republic said, sure, come on over. And we're going to build a new bridge and highway to connect Crimea directly to Russia without having to go through Ukraine. And they did that. And that's how we got to this mess. Russia did not steal Crimea. Russia did not annex Crimea. Russia did not conquer Crimea. Crimea is now part of Russia of their own free democratic will. All right, now that we have educated the government agents, I'm going to go back to talking a little bit faster. So Kiev is admitting that Ukraine and NATO are conducting joint preparations for a war to reconquer Crimea. Now, according to Alexei Arestovich, the press secretary of the Ukrainian delegation in the contact group on resolving the crisis in the Donbass. Boy, they really like these long, flowery names. Anyway, he had an interview with Ukrainian media and said that NATO exercises Defender Europe 2021 would be conducted to practice the situation of an armed confrontation with Russia. The exercises will be focused on the Balkans, Crimea, and everything to the north of it. So they are really, really ramping up here, and I think we all need to be concerned here. Story coming on out of Russia today again. With tensions rising in Donbass, Ukraine pulls out of the Minsk peace talks. Kiev is refusing to meet Russia and the OSCE in the Belarusian capital. So there was this trilateral contact group that consists of Ukraine, Russia, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And Kiev has basically told him to go pound sand at this point. Russia has amassed the largest concentration of troops on its border with Ukraine since the eastern Ukraine conflict erupted in 2014. Recent Russian military movements and an increase in clashes between Ukrainian forces and separatists have raised fears of an escalation in the long, simmering war. And it doesn't help the fact that the United States is sending in arms to the area as well. Let's see. Ukraine says NATO only way to end the Donbass war. We talked about that one already. This is an article coming out of antiwar.com, and they're talking about 37,000 troops from the U.S. and NATO participating in a war game, again, practicing for a confrontation with Russia. You would think that after what happened to Napoleon and Hitler, that cooler heads would prevail, but hey, what can I tell you? They don't listen to me over here. From Pravda, we get this article that the U.S. Air Force is prepping for World War III. And they're reproducing large-scale aerial warfare between great powers, simulating the threats and challenges they could face in combat in what is being called multi-domain warfare. And they're out there playing with their state-of-the-art fifth-generation aircraft, like the mighty F-35. Yeah, I can't wait to see that one in actual combat. Meanwhile, U.S. and Iranian officials are saying that the indirect talks in Vienna yesterday aimed at reviving the 2015 nuclear deal were constructive. Now, remember, we reported yesterday that Iran is saying if the United States is serious about coming back to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the first thing they have to do is drop all the sanctions, which was a requirement of that Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The U.S. is taking the position that Iran has to stop all enrichment and be fully in compliance with the deal, and then they'll start kind of rolling back on the sanctions. And Iran is not trusting the U.S. government, nor should they, because when the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was signed and ratified, instead of repealing all of the sanctions that the United States had placed on Iran, the United States simply added more on there. It was an arrogant thing for them to do, and it's destroyed the United States' credibility in that part of the world. So, according to a Russian diplomat, and this is being reported in TASS, both the United States and Iran said they're ready to restore the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in full, and they have no open confrontation between themselves. So it sounds really good, but until there is ink on paper, I wouldn't put too much in there. The New York Times is reporting that yesterday an Iranian cargo vessel, the Saviz, was attacked in the Red Sea by a missile or mine. It is thought that this came from Israel. There has been no official confirmation from Tehran on the reported attack. Apparently, Israel notified the U.S. That its forces had attacked an Iranian vessel and damaged it below the waterline, which means if it doesn't get to some port real quick, it could be in serious trouble. So according to this anonymous official, the Israelis had called the attack a retaliation for earlier Iranian strikes on Israeli vessels. And the official noted the Saviz had been damaged below the waterline. He went on to say it was possible the attack had been delayed so that an American aircraft carrier in the area could distance itself from the Saviz. At the moment the Saviz was hit, the Eisenhower was about 200 miles away. Shades of the USS Liberty. All right, our U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin will be the Biden administration's first top cabinet member to visit Israel. He's going to arrive there next week, and he's going to be basically talking about Iran and Israel's maritime tensions. Okay. This is an interesting story, and it came out of the Jerusalem Post, no less. And they're talking about a program from the Israeli archive was aired on the Palestinian Authority's TV channel this week, and basically tells the story that Jews who immigrated to Israel during World War II were helped by Arabs and then later turned on them. Now, the program's episode on the expulsion of the Jews from Germany aired and was immediately translated and distributed by Palestinian media. Basically, they're saying that the Jews came on in. The Arabs, who tend to be hospitable people, tried to help them out, only to have the Jews turn around and start to try and kick them off the land and take it over for themselves, which they continue to do to this very day. I think it was on Monday we had mentioned there was a little bit of a kerfuffle over in Jordan, and Jordan's former crown prince, interesting story there, Prince Hamza, has been liaising with foreign parties over a malicious plot to destabilize the country, according to the Jordanian deputy prime minister. On Saturday, the military said it had issued a warning to the prince over actions targeting security and stability in the kingdom. Prince Hamza, who is King Abdullah II's half-brother, later said he was under house arrest, and several other high-profile figures have been detained. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is considering joining a boycott of the 2022 Beijing Olympics over China's supposed human rights abuses. And I'm absolutely opposed to this. I mean, so much is being politicized now. Let's leave the Olympics alone and let the kids have their games, okay? Really, I mean, if you go back to the original Olympics, for the period of the Olympics, all the animosities were put down, the wars were stopped, and everybody got together for the games. And I think it was a grand, grand tradition. Meanwhile, speaking of human rights abuses, you're going to love this one. Cuba has summoned a Biden envoy to complain about the flagrant human rights abuses here in the United States of America. The Ministry of Foreign Relations of Cuba confirmed Monday it had summoned the top American diplomat in the country, the embassy charged d'affaires Timothy Zuniga Brown, to protest the flagrant and systematic violations of human rights. And so, yeah. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, as it were. This is a little bit worrying. The Marshal Shaposhnikov, Russia's upgraded Project 1155M frigate, has test-fired a Caliber cruise missile in the Sea of Japan, striking a sea surface target at a distance of 100 kilometers. This is coming from the Pacific Fleet's Information Service. And they also fired another Caliber cruise missile that hit a coastal target at a distance of over 1,000 kilometers. That is a very, very capable weapon. And certainly when you get into the realm of the hypersonics, Russia and China are way ahead of us, and literally we don't have a means of defeating or defending against these high-speed weapons. It just really doesn't happen. Getting into the economic news now, Credit Suisse has fired 2 senior executives as it suffered billions of pounds worth of losses following the collapse of hedge fund Archegos and the British finance firm Greensill. Morgan Stanley sold $5 billion in shares from Archegos the night before the news hit the market that the investment firm was about to collapse. So I think that qualifies as insider trading, and somebody should be going to jail for that. Jeff Bezos is out there saying that Amazon supports Biden's corporate tax hike, despite the fact that Amazon, a $315 billion company, paid zero federal tax for the last 2 years because of all the loopholes that are very much out there. We have to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back with more news after these few words. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the economy, and the IMF and the World Bank are about to kick off their spring meetings, where these two institutions who pay no taxes at all will talk about tax evasion, tax hikes, inequality, and building back better. Now, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is going to use the platform to push for a global standardization, upwards, of course, of corporate tax rates. And National Security Advisor Sullivan has also tweeted his support. Now, the idea here is that they want all nations everywhere to tax corporations at the same rate, so that when the rates go up, there is no motivation for corporations to, move to another country to basically pay lower taxes. This is not going to work. And and I'll tell you why. All these other countries are going to immediately lower their tax rates in order to pillage American corporations away from the United States and onto their soil, where they will create jobs and products to sell to bolster their economy. These other countries, they're not stupid, and they're not interested in globalism. They want to turn a decent profit. And this idea that the rest of the world is going to go along with raising taxes, it's not going to work. It is simply not going to work. All it's going to take is one country to refuse to go along with that, to say that our tax rates for corporations are half of what the rest of the world does, and businesses are going to be flocking to their doors like there's no tomorrow. This is a disaster waiting to happen for the American economy, and it's all being driven by the fact that we have a government that cannot manage its own money. It spends, and taxes. And let's not get into the argument about whether corporations should pay more taxes, or middle class should pay more taxes, or the wealthy should pay more taxes, because we are, all of us, taxed way too much. And it is paralyzing our economy. Biden came out the other day saying that this $3 trillion in additional taxes that he's going to impose on us all to pay for his infrastructure program, which actually does very little for the infrastructure, will not harm the economy. Of course it will. All taxes harm the economy to some point, because it's taking money out of circulation to build businesses with and putting it in the hands of the government, which is going to spend it on things like war and Israel and various scientific studies on why prostitutes in foreign countries like to get drunk. I mean, they actually did that one at one time. So it really, this is going to be an epic fail. I'll tell you right now, this is absolutely going to be an epic fail. Story coming on out of Breitbart, talking about Apple is making a deal with Google to basically dominate the search engine market. And Apple has made a deal with Google so that Apple's search engine will operate with Google's algorithms and further control what we see, hear, and read. And I don't know about you, but I don't use Google anymore. Oh, there's the music. Time for us to take a break for station identification, and we'll be back. We're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, 512-248-8252. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, area code 512-248-8252, and the lines are loading up already. So let's go to Kelly in Austin. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You know, I have to laugh when I hear Democrats proposing this international tax plan. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is what you get when you elect people to office who have never spent a day working in the private sector in their lives. I mean, that's just absolutely idiotic. Did they actually think that other countries are going to raise their corporate tax rates to match those in the United States? I don't think so.
No.
Ireland, for example, I think had an 8% corporate tax rate. That's why the great many American companies have set up shop in Ireland. And the same thing will happen again.
Yes.
They'll flee to Ireland. They'll go to other countries. Do you think Mexico's going to raise its corporate tax rates to match the United States? Hell no. Mexico will be more than glad to have American companies move down. So the fact that they would come up with something like that tells me that they're absolutely living in never land.
Yes, they are. They absolutely are.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one of those things, it sounds really good when they're making a speech or talking to the media, but they're not thinking these things all the way through. And, you know, it alarms me that they're now starting to say that, you know, intelligence is white supremacism and everything. Well, if there's some place that we need to have intelligence working, it's in the government. But it does seem like it's an endangered species at this point.
Well, certainly the people in our government right now lack the intelligence to understand
yes.
these things. And it's really, it's just shocking to hear them come up with that. I want to correct one thing that Bruce from Texas said yesterday.
Okay.
He was commenting about uranium in the oil industry. The problem in oil and gas production is not uranium, it's radium. and it forms a scale. What happens is it forms a scale on the inside of pipes and tubing, and it is a radium carbonate or a radium sulfate. And if you go to pipe yards or around old production sites, they'll clean out the pipes and the lines, and they'll leave that scale on the ground, and that becomes a matter of litigation. It's a big problem in Louisiana. Well, it's overstated, but it's been a source of litigation, and it's resulted in plaintiffs being awarded tens of millions of dollars for something that can be easily cleaned up. And so it's just a simple matter of chemistry. The radium is a divalent cation floating around out there in water. And when it reaches a saturation point with the carbonate or with the sulfate, it will drop out and form a scale. And it's going to adhere, again, to the inside of the pipes and the tubings. And again, it becomes an issue because those things get cleaned out, and they leave these things on the ground. I've told many of my clients before, when you finish producing on a site, clean it up. Don't leave anything out there. I mean, because you have a big target on your back right there. And this radium issue, in every oil and gas case I've ever consulted in, we always have on staff as a consultant a health physicist, somebody who can address the issues related to radioactivity, and it's always radium, never uranium. But that's because of the nature of that beast and what it binds up with. So, nobody's putting uranium out there in oil and gas fields. And it's it's a matter of naturally occurring radium in the subsurface reacting with carbonates and sulfates to form a scale. That's what it does.
Okay.
I just want to clear that up. So, anyway, about this tax issue, to close it out there.
Yes.
We are really screwed if these people try to push this thing through. You're going to see an exodus of American businesses out of this country to other countries that will be unlike none you've ever seen before. I think. And right now, people are already doubting. They're already having a voter's remorse.
Yes.
And
they shouldn't, because the election was stolen, and then we have to keep our eyes on that fact. The people who stole the White House for Biden are stealing our tax money as well, and it's hardly surprising that in their victory they're raising taxes so that they can maximize their plunder.
Yeah. I mean, and they don't care. They don't care.
No.
Our pockets are here for them to pick. That's exactly.
Yeah, but our pockets are pretty much empty. There just isn't any more to tax.
They don't care. They don't know, or they don't care. I'm serious. But they think they're smarter than everybody else. And again, as I said, this comes about because you put people in an office who've never spent a day in the private sector in their lives.
True.
Donald Trump would understand that. Donald Trump understood that. That's why he wanted to lower tax rates to 22%. If he could have gotten up lower than that, I'm pretty sure he would have. But these morons up there in Washington, D.C. are absolutely, they're clueless. They're just clueless. Yeah. Anyway, that's my rant for today.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to go to Joe in California. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Michael. Also, welcome back, Brendan in California. Great calls lately, so welcome back.
Okay.
There you go. Mike, before I get to my main point, I think Kelly in Austin, I think he's engaging in some pre-COVID thinking, sensible thinking. If I were a betting man, I believe this international tax will go through. This is a foundation of the New World Order, one world government. They're not going to allow, these people are not going to allow, these corporations will go along, these woke corporations. These people behind the Davos set, the UN, the oligarchs, the deep state, they're not going to allow these corporations to just move to where they want to move to get the lowest tax rate, be it Ireland or Switzerland. It's not going to happen. This is going to go through. I will be shocked if it doesn't go through.
Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree, because I think this is going to be a disaster for the American economy.
Well, I don't think. I think these companies will. I think these companies will adhere to any international tax agreement. I don't think you're going to have. I mean, look what happened with COVID. Were there any outlying countries that didn't follow the WHO guidelines? I mean, yeah, Belarus, Sweden, and Nicaragua. That's it.
Yeah.
You already have one world government, Mike. There's no place to hide. You know, I watch Doug Casey once in a while, and he talks about. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Yeah, he talks about finding a safe haven, and I was looking at other countries, but there is no safe haven anymore. They don't exist. They're all on the same page.
Well, as you pointed out, you know, Russia is not going along with this globalism thing. I'm not expecting Russia to raise their corporate taxes. In fact, I'm expecting them to drop them again to try and siphon off American businesses to come do business where they are. Now, we do have these woke corporations, but ultimately they're answerable to their stockholders. And the stockholders are going to say, look, why are you still here when you can go to this other country and we can get more money for our investment? And if you're not going to do that, then at the next stockholders meeting, you are out.
Okay, well, let's see what transpires, but I think it'll go through. My main reason for calling is Matt Gaetz today's Gary Condit.
Yes.
Like, for example, like, is they're using this to divert attention from potential war with Russia,
yes,
or a major false flag, like what happened with 9/11?
Yeah, I'm expecting there's going to be some kind of a false flag to cement the idea that Russia's to blame for all of this, you know, when the shooting really gets underway.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. And we're going to go to Peter in Los Angeles. Hello, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, you've got some pretty good minds to call in there, and I'm a fan of Kelly's and Joe's, and I have to come down on your side of this one. It's the giant sucking sound that Ross Perot used to talk about.
Yes.
And with the tax thing, and the key point you hit on was that these guys, including the banks, who are above, in my theory of things, are reign above everybody in the pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
They want to get a return on the dollar, return on the yuan, and the discipline it would take for any country around the world, for any leader or businessman or stockholders or whatever, to just simply say, we're lowering our tax rate, come one, come all. And the first one that does that's going to get a lot. And there's just no way. And of course, the pressure for the quarterly returns, as you alluded to.
Yes.
It's just these are immutable, water flows downhill kind of rules.
Yes.
And greed is what the whole system is based on, and greed is what will keep that from happening. So I believe you're right in that. But Mike, I wanted to also point out something that I was thinking about the other day. I don't know what the status is of Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah.
The kid with the AR-15.
Yeah.
Was protecting property, and he was a minor. He was there. You know, first he was scouring off graffiti, and then he was helping people at a medical, first aid center, and then protecting a car lot. All protection, all upholding the law, attacked by 3 or 4 30-year-old plus felons who were also armed. They chased him down. He had to fire in self-defense. And as far as I know, the charges are still pending for him. His trial is still pending.
Yes.
And he's still in jail.
Yes.
Am I correct about that?
I don't know if he's still in jail or not, but you're right. They're trying to make an example out of him so that you're loath to protect yourself from the mob.
And I want to contrast that with these 2 teenage black skanks in Washington.
Yes.
In the process of trying to steal a car, a major felony, somebody would die, and was killed in the midst of a major felony and robbery.
Mm-hmm.
And they too are minors. And you know what? They've already been relegated to the under 18, the minor.
Yes.
The child law.
They got a plea deal. They're not even going to go to jail.
Yeah, not even going to go to jail. By the time they're 21, this is all forgotten.
Yes.
Except for the 66-year-old guy who died. And you look at how differently and look at the difference in the quality of the people involved and their motives, and yet look at how the legal system reacted to that.
Yes.
And is reacting. And you were speaking of the governmental IQ, and again, whoever it is, and I heard the quote today, actually. There's state-controlled media and then media-controlled state.
Yes.
And we are the latter.
Yes, we are.
Media-controlled state. And they're the ones that rig the elections. You know who they are, and you can look who owns them. And but that's who's setting this agenda. So they are our government. And the Chauvin thing, where we're seeing, this guy is in Ann Coulter's, to quote her, this guy's going to be a human sacrifice.
Yes, he is.
And it's totally clear, Mike, that he did the right thing. That this guy was the sainted Floyd, whatever his name is, George Floyd.
Yes.
With his home invasions, porn stuff, drug dealing, drug consuming,
passing counterfeit bills.
Passing counterfeit bills, ODing on twice or three times the lethal dose of fentanyl, speedball, because he also was doing methamphetamines.
Yes.
And he had COVID. So all that's going on, and this guy's resisting arrest. And by the way, the film that you alluded to in your initial news thing was the one the media avoided. They had it, and they refused to share it.
Yes.
The one that showed, it was one of the other officers' cameras that showed his knee on the back and not on the neck. And yet they chose to show that, just like they refused to show, Mike, for the longest period of time, the 9 minutes prior to the I can't breathe thing.
Yes.
Where he was saying, when they were being so deferential to him in the back of the squad car, and even in his own car, or and saying, he couldn't breathe there. Nobody. And the media, again, state-controlled, media-controlled state, the media chose to not show that at all.
Yeah.
Until July.
No, because they're pushing the agenda. They're trying to get the whites and the blacks at each other's throats. They're trying to distract from the impending war. They're hoping we're going to forget all about the stolen election last year. Fat chance on that one. They're thrashing around.
Mike, it's clearly they're doing it on purpose.
Yes. Yes.
They're doing it on purpose.
No question.
And I would tell you, I think that going back to this is media-controlled state, bank-controlled state, because the banks even own the media, really.
Well, let's not forget the CIA. They got their fingers in a lot of pies.
Yes, but, they want to get rich, too. In the end, what's their motivation? Well, they want to be rich and powerful, and they're not going to get it without the bank's acquiescence. That's the key to everything, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the governmental people are trading power for money, and the media oligarchs and the bankers are trading money for power. In the end, you can buy all the killers, all the hitmen you want, on the aftermarket. You don't have to go to the CIA or the FBI, although they probably have better ones. But they can get all that on their own with the billions of dollars they have.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that this is, again, how does 1.7% of the population control Everybody else, including 60% of the population that they're trying to keep down and demonize and completely weaponize the black community and everybody else against them, well, it's divide and conquer. That's how 1.7% maintains its. Talk about I can't breathe.
Yes.
They're knee on our neck and are strangling us to death. And we got nowhere to go. This is our country, and we got nowhere to go. And they've got like a bayonet at our throat. So, anyways, it's pretty clear to me that's the way this world operates.
Well, again, I think there's a lot of players that are in on this thing, and I really think we need to pay as much attention to CIA, which went rogue decades ago, and they've been behind a lot of stuff like the flow of cocaine into Arkansas. Remember Gary Webb talking about how they were bringing the cocaine into this country? So, yeah, and you have to wonder who's got the kind of power it takes to get all these media entities and all these corporations to gang up on Georgia and try and whoop them. To me, it really goes back to CIA.
Well, the CIA clearly is involved, and they're clearly suborned, but, again, you can buy their capability, and as a matter of fact, nobody censors more than the media.
Yes.
Nobody censors more than social media, right? So these billionaires, they can buy hitmen forever.
Yes.
Anything the CIA can do, they can do. And by the way, they pay for the CIA. The bosses of the CIA are the guys that they got hired. So, when you can print money out of anything, there's nothing you can't accomplish. So on my Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever, I put printing of money without any kind of accountability or auditing for over 100 years. That trumps just about everything.
Yeah, it does. Okay, Peter, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. Phone lines are open, 512-248-8252, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and again, a friendly beg that Republic Broadcasting Network is somewhere in the middle of a perpetual fundraising drive because we need your continuing support to go on educating the American people, keeping them fully informed with facts, not dogma, so that they can make good choices. And once again, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. Now, if you mail in a donation of $100, you will get your choice of an RBN coffee mug or an RBN t-shirt, and obviously you need to include a return address and a t-shirt size. For $115 or more, you will receive both items, and don't forget the Front Sight Firearms deal is still ongoing. We have open phone lines. Area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Dan in Washington. Hello, Dan. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Thanks for taking the call. I disagree with you. I hope this global corporate tax rate, I don't think it will happen, but it should. I think global corporations are a threat to national sovereignty. And this idea that you can just move your headquarters around the world and not pay taxes is ridiculous. Like you said in your opening, Amazon didn't pay any income taxes for 3 years, so we know Trump's tax thing didn't do anything about that. So but that global corporations are a threat to national sovereignty. They weren't really allowed in America. Didn't even really exist before Reagan in the 1980s. So I say tax them out of existence or put a tariff on them if they don't want to be based in America. But yeah, I don't agree. Like I said, the conservative movement is getting the cashier at Walmart to feel sorry for the CEO of Walmart, and that's what conservatism is all about.
Well,
all I
I'm a
see here,
conservative. I'm
guys.
paleocon, and I certainly am not trying to convince the cashier at Walmart to feel sorry for the CEO at Walmart. I think that's a mischaracterization of conservatism. But again, we're getting away from the point that we have a government that, first of all, it's illegitimate by virtue of the stolen election last November, and it is simply spending money crazily. They're like money junkies is what they've become, and they're out there spending other people's money, which is a lot of fun to do, and they're raising taxes on everybody. And as I stated back when I was talking about this before, the problem isn't who is getting taxed more or less, it's that we are all taxed way, way, way too much, and it is strangling our economy, not just in the United States, but globally.
Do you really think that? You really think that the Amazon shouldn't get taxed at all? And
I think Amazon should be paying taxes. Hang on. I think, I think some of these loopholes do need to be closed here, but I think we need to focus on the fact that taxes are in general way too high, especially when you consider what we're getting back for that money. Now, there are countries in Europe that have high taxes, but you get free medical care, free education, all kinds of social support and services. Here in the United States of America, we pay very high taxes, and we're not really getting a lot back for that money. Maybe Drag Queen Story Hour or something like that. And frankly, I think we need a cash for clunkers program for the U.S. government, where we take our big bloated government over to the junkyard, they put it in the little machine and turn it into a coffee table, and then we get a check for $50,000 to buy a smaller, more efficient, more cost-effective government.
Well, I mean, we can agree to disagree. I think it's a very big issue that a big corporation doesn't pay the same taxes as someone working at Walmart. You know, I think that's a big issue when you have the Wall Street, which is the center of the global financial worth hundreds of trillions of dollars, and then you got people eating out of garbage cans being taxed, and these corporations can go around the world and not get taxed. That is a big issue, and it's a threat to our national sovereignty, and there's really no reason for global corporations really to exist at all. And if they got taxed out of existence, it'd make my day better, personally. Because who's doing all these wars? Who's pushing these wars? Who's profiting off, you know, getting the heroin trade or the lithium and all this stuff? So, you know, it's just ridiculous what's going on in my view, but...
I agree. I mean, some of these corporations are nations unto themselves, and no less a person than Abraham Lincoln warned us what was going to happen if corporations were allowed to exist endlessly. And, you know, there used to be laws regarding monopolies and trusts, but they're not being enforced anymore, and this has allowed a few corporations to become these giant behemoths that are able to basically buy the politicians to make the government that the corporations want to have. And we, the American people, are being disenfranchised. The last election proved that. So we're living in a corporatocracy, or the corporate state. Anyway, Dan, gotta let you go. Dan, gotta let you go. And we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Welcome back to our show here. We have open phone lines now, area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Miles in Maine. Hello, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. You know, there's a reason that this tax won't work, and that's why it hasn't been already tried before. It might go over in somewhere like California or something like that, but it's not going to. And let's be realistic. They're not going to tax all these billionaires. I mean, they might tell you that now, but in the end, they're going to give them loopholes and everything else, and they're going to use it to raise the taxes on the not so wealthy. So, I mean, that's what you end up seeing. Now, when it gets to this George Floyd case, Michael, I think since the officer's already a bit behind the eight ball, I might take a proactive stance. I think I might just go right out here if I'm an attorney and say my client's innocent. We're going to show he's innocent. And you know, you might not like that verdict, but just as people, when busing, when the integration of the schools came about in Arkansas, we had to send out the National Guard to protect people's rights. And if we have to protect this gentleman's right because he's innocent, then that's what we're going to do. And I think I just come out right like that and say, this man's innocent. We're going to show he's innocent, regardless of who likes it. And just like we did in Little Rock, we're going to protect this gentleman's civil rights too. We're going to show you conclusive evidence that he's innocent. We're going to show you that the media has corroborated to try and hinder us being able to.
No, he's being convicted in the press already.
Yeah, and I think I would take a proactive stance and let the chips fall where they may. If they come out, you got to call the National Guard out like they did in Little Rock. Well, they weren't afraid to open fire then. So if they've got to open fire to keep peace, so be it. That's what they're there for. Thank you, Michael. Have a great show.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot here. And I'm really of the opinion that we have reached a point where we can no longer afford to let these fringe groups like Black Lives Matter and Antifa, turn this country into a mobocracy, where if they stand out in the street and scream enough, they'll get money, they'll get convictions, they'll get special treatment. Enough is enough. That's not the way this country is supposed to operate. Okay, the phone lines are all open now. Area code 512-248-8252. Getting on back to the news here. And over in New York, Governor Cuomo and New York lawmakers have reached a deal on a $212 billion budget deal that will legalize online sports betting and raise taxes on high earners. Now, have you noticed that the more desperate governments get for money, the more they're legalizing for lack of a better word, vice? I mean, we all know what Nevada is like regarding prostitution and gambling, but can you imagine the entire country like that? I mean, yes, we've got the lotteries and everything, but now they're talking about online sports betting. They're talking about legalizing marijuana in a lot of states, including right here in Indiana. And, the legalization and taxation of such thing may solve a short-term budget shortfall, but in the long term, I don't think it's necessarily healthy for the country as a whole. So that's where they're going. And as far as the taxes on high earners, it is never going to happen because the high earners will simply donate to the opposition in the next election campaign, and these politicians know it. Getting on back to this idea of the U.S. demanding other countries raise the corporate tax rate, there's an article out of Russia Today saying that the U.S. wanting other countries to raise corporate tax so it can profit is a bizarre super capitalist demand. And in typical world-leading nation fashion, the U.S. is out there requesting that other countries raise their corporate tax to a global standard minimum. Now, this may be good to combat tax havens, but it's only being done with America's profits and tax revenues in mind, and that's absolutely true what's going on. Getting on down to immigration and the border, earlier in the week, we mentioned on how these two Yemeni terror suspects who are on the watch list were allowed across the border, and then they were arrested and held. Well, now all of a sudden, the official record of their capture and arrest is being erased. It's being Orwellized under the rubric of national security. And Kevin McCarthy is demanding a briefing on just how many terror suspects have crossed into the U.S. and why these two are being protected by the national security state. Were they coming into the United States of America to do a new 9/11, to get the war against Russia going, or to justify an increased military presence in Yemen? Not really sure, but something's going on there if they're citing national security to erase their pictures and the reports of their arrest. Another story on the same subject. This one is from, let's see, Involve.com. Border crisis cover-up. Biden administration hides information about terrorists captured at the border and gives a ridiculous excuse for why that was done, which again is that national security situation. Okay, we have callers waiting on the line, and we're going to go to Andy in Texas. Hello, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, nice to talk to you again. I think people need to realize that their country has dissolved underneath their feet.
Yes.
There is no politician that you can call. There's no judge you can go see. There's no lawsuit you can file. I mean, they've done a really good job. George Soros is probably the number one factor in paying off all these politicians and whatnot. However, there's so many other people that pay off politicians too. We can't just nail George Soros for that, although he's been the
He's a major player. He's a major player.
Yeah.
You know, and proof that only the good die young.
Exactly, and he's going to die old, just like Rockefeller, just like all them politicians that end up living in their 90s and stuff. Neither of us will get there. We know that because we don't get what they get. They get the good. We get what they. It seems like these people have actually. They've amassed enough amount of money to buy this world from God. Somehow,
yes.
Or whoever the creator is. It's like they bought it from us, from them, and we don't play a part. We're just sitting here trying to live our lives, and you know, most of us, I'm betting pretty much all of us, besides a handful of these globalists, we just really want to just get up every morning and go do what we do to survive. And then go back home and do what we want to do. Well, these people want to provoke us into doing stuff we don't want to do. And
yes.
This whole division, they're provoking us into fighting each other. They're provoking us. I mean, we made these countries on this world. We made these countries. And then all of a sudden we found ways to get angry at these countries, so then we fight wars. Well, all wars are bankers' wars.
Yes.
All wars are for a reason. There's a reason. It's always about depopulation. These people are infatuated with depopulation. They want to get rid of us. And it's just, I'm just sitting here, you know, I'm trying to put all this together. I'm trying to talk to friends and stuff. And, well, you find out who your friends are when you start talking to them about this stuff, because they tell you to shut up. I don't want to hear that. And it's like, what? Why don't you want to hear this? It has everything to do about your life coming up. Well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die, whatever. Oh, well, I'm glad you have that feeling. But, you know, I wish you'd change your mind. So we really got some issues going on in here. But the problem really is with all these people that are succumbing to vaccines. And I'm sorry you took the Johnson & Johnson, but you did what you had to do. There's a lot of things that are going on with these vaccines, and people just aren't aware that there is a underlying consequence to this. I mean, people actually think that their government cares for them. Well, I got a newsflash for you. They've never cared for you. They've never cared for you. You were just a money. And once they went up the gold standard, they didn't need us anymore.
Yes.
So our taxes are insignificant. I mean, they can print as much money as they want. They can do whatever they want. They can have that $690 billion defense bill and pass it with no problem, knowing that that's about as much taxes they collect every year from us. So they pretty much are spending every dollar that they collect from us in taxes. I think it's like $1.2 trillion, but you know, $690 billion. That's not too far away. But they're pretty much spending everything. And why? Why? When was the last time you saw somebody that was trying to take over America? The last time we saw it was COVID-19.
Yes.
The first time we saw it in our lifetime was probably 9/11.
Yes.
Now they're trying to take us over. And, you know, that little thing where you say, I'm going to defend my country against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yes.
Well, people need to look at that the domestic part of it.
Yes.
Because that's where we're at right now. We have a domestic enemy.
Yes, we do.
People need to see this. They've got to see it for what it is. But right now, people are not out of their comfort zone. Okay, they're giving us just enough money to survive. They've extended these unemployment benefits. They're giving us just enough money to get by. Well, when does that end? And when that ends, what are you going to do about it? There has to be a solution. There needs to be some people to come together. And we actually, I mean, there's got to be at least 1 million people listening to this radio show or at least awake to the things we're talking about. We need to come together somehow outside of a manipulation area, such as a cell phone or a computer or something. We need to start having community meetings. We need to start getting together. Militias need to be starting talking, but we know a lot of these militias have already been infiltrated.
Yes.
But we do need to start talking in our communities. Even if we're not willing to fight for our freedom, we need to start talking in our communities to get ready to survive whatever might be coming.
Well, again,
really
I'm opposed to a civil war and violent revolution. I still hold that the future of the government of the United States of America is a Soviet Union-style collapse, and I think those who are concerned about what's going on in the country today ought to be thinking about what can they do to hurry that along.
I almost concur with that, because we really do need restructuring.
Yes.
And, the Declaration of Independence says it very well.
Yes.
If we see that this is an unjust government, we have the right and the duty to overthrow it.
Yes.
That's where we're at. We need to overthrow this government. It has to go. But how do we do it?
That's not what the Declaration says. The Declaration does not say overthrow. It says throw off the government. And there's a little difference there, again, because the question is whether we can do it peacefully and non-violently, or is, as John Kennedy used to say, when peaceful revolution becomes impossible, violent revolution becomes inevitable. I don't want to see that. I don't think I can stop it, but I don't want to see it.
And I certainly don't want to see that either. If there was a way, but like I said earlier, I mean, the courts are tainted.
Yes.
Look at the Supreme Court.
They ran like heck when the election fraud lawsuits showed up. They pulled every trick they could to not let the evidence be read in open court. And the reports from inside the Supreme Court is that there were some very loud arguments about the damage to the nation if it came out that the election was stolen. Well, the damage is already done because the majority of Americans know this last election was crooked.
And so that loses, you lose confidence in your government. But you also got to look at the fact that we always get a Democrat and Republican, and both of them are establishment candidates.
Yes.
So we can never win for losing. I mean, we vote in the Republican, they're still going to do what the Democrat would have done. We vote in the Democrat, they're still going to do what the Republican would have done.
Yeah, every election is the choice between Tweedledee, Tweedledum, and Tweedledummer.
And there you go. Exactly. So, I mean, America, wake up. Come on, man. You've been taken by surprise for many of you. Many of us knew what was coming, saw it coming, tried to warn you. I mean, Mr. Mike here he's been warning you for years, people. Wake up. There's no more time for playing around. Figure out what you're going to do. At least get someplace to survive. That's all I got, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Pam in Peoria. Hello, Pam. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're on the air.
Oh, great. I'm a first-time caller, so have patience with me. Number one, I'm surprised that YouTube reports so few likes from your program. I listen every day, or I catch it the next day.
Yes.
But there are a couple of points I want to bring up, because your callers seem to be very informed, and they get around a lot better than I do. Number one, having lost the governor's race in Georgia, I'm wondering, what did Stacey Abrams say to the baseball commission for them to make the decision to move to Colorado, who has similar election laws?
Yes.
It reminds me very much of Cortez in New York. Remember with Amazon?
Yes.
Amazon threw up their hands and said, hey, I'm not dealing with this. And I wonder if behind the scenes that is what's going on. My second point is our country's being dismantled.
Yes.
Okay, right before our eyes. That's the only word I can say. And what better target than to attack American baseball and Hank Aaron? That was very odd, and it just reminded me of Cortez and Amazon in New York. And the last thing I just wanted to point out, and if any of your callers have any info on that, but something went on behind the scenes that I bet the baseball league said, hey, I'm not dealing with this crap, but the news story out front is because of the election laws. Lastly, I am African American. I know a whole bunch of African Americans, Mike, and I do not know one black person who objects to voter ID because they all know that the 2020 was rigged.
Yeah,
but
they
anyway,
do.
Those are my thoughts. But this, something's not being told. I bet they threw up their hands like Amazon did, Mike.
They may have.
But that's all I have to say.
All right. Well, Pam, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment and another phone call after these few words. And welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. We're going to go back to the phones to Mitchell in Memphis. Hello, Mitchell. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike Rivero, what's going on?
Well, I don't know. I was hoping you were going to tell me.
Oh, I'll try. Listen, you've mentioned government legitimacy. I've heard you mention that several times.
Yes.
I've heard other callers can make the point that they don't think government's legitimate, along with some of the hosts, a lot of the hosts.
Mm-hmm.
I've put together 16 points of evidence that the government is no longer legitimate.
Okay.
Dating back to the founding documents all the way up to date. But yours will work, the idea of the election process. So the government's not legitimate. Let's establish that. I want to read a definition real quick. Violence. Behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. So we know what violence is. The important thing to understand is who started the incident, who initiated the action of coercion or whatever. Okay. So now let's go back to government legitimacy. If you have legitimate government, you have what's called legitimate political authority.
Yes.
Would that follow?
Yes, that would follow.
If you do not have a legitimate government, you do not have legitimate political authority.
No, you have tyranny and dictatorship.
Exactly. So we have people impersonating government officials.
Yes.
Now, you know what the penalty is if you impersonate a police officer, or you've talked about the John Badout case. If an officer's doing something that he's not entitled to do, you know how the John
I remember how that ended.
Okay, so let's go to January the 6th.
Okay.
Now, everybody talks about, well, Antifa was violent, or BLM, or it was the Patriots, or it was Simone Gold. I want to know, we have people in positions of authority that aren't supposed to be there.
Well, they have usurped that authority.
Exactly. So could we make the argument that the individuals in government at the Capitol, they started the violent actions? I mean, they're taxing people and they're carrying out all the things that they do as, quote, government when they don't have legitimate political authority. I maintain that they started the violent actions, and that all the other people storming, as they said, the Capitol were merely defending themselves. Could we make that argument?
We could make the argument, but I think we're getting dangerously close to the idea that he did it first as a justification for civil war. And I look back on what Mahatma Gandhi said, that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and soon the whole world is blind and toothless.
Okay, Mike, now I'm not advocating anything on the phone call.
All right.
I'm simply trying to establish, because I hear a lot of the Republican types trying to run from an act like, oh, it's BLM. I don't care if it's BLM or if it was Casper the Friendly Ghost. I want to know who started it. Who started this business? And we've established now that the individuals in the positions of power of this thing called the government are illegitimate. They have no legitimate political authority.
No, they
need
don't.
to be
They absolutely don't. Mitchell, I'm sorry to have to cut you off, but we are at the end of our program. Feel free to call back in tomorrow and we'll continue this discussion. Meanwhile, everybody stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. It is more important now than ever. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.